Thank you, thank you. Wine to the people.
You know, wine has so much to offer. On the nose and the palate, there's all kinds of flavors and aromas going on in a wine, and we've talked about this in previous video blogs. But one thing that imparts a lot of flavor into a wine is oak exposure. And I want to talk about that. Wine can be aged in a plethora of vessels. You have oak, you have stainless steel, you have amphora, it's ancient but they still use it, and they have concrete with a glass line. The most popular, of course, is oak. The history of the oak barrel in wine is kind of spotty because wood decomposes, so it's hard to kind of archaeologically trace. While the Roman Empire was doing its thing, they were aging wine in something called amphora, which is a clay cylindrical vessel with a little point on the bottom. They shove it into the earth, throw wine in there, and that's what they use to age their wine. Around this time, oak barrels were around. But see, what barrels were used for was to transport goods, dry and wet, liquid. Because oak is almost impermeable. So you could make a barrel out of oak wood and it wouldn't leak. Some point, someone put wine into a barrel, shoved it off somewhere else in the world. By the time it got to its point where the journey's end, they tasted the wine, and it tasted a little bit different than when they first put it in.
That's really good.
The oak barrel. We don't really know who that was, we don't know when it happened, but at some point it happened. And then it went crazy. Bordeaux started using it, Burgundy started using it, everybody started using oak because oak has certain properties that interact with wine and add aromas and add flavors and add textures to a wine. So first of all, how is a barrel made? And once we understand how a barrel is made, then we're going to understand how it interacts with wine. Generally, it's very simple. You have a forest with an oak tree. You take down an oak tree, you throw that oak out into the elements, you age it outside for up to 36 months. So all the impurities extract themselves from the wood. Then you take the wood, the oak, and you make them into these long staves, these long thin boards. You take them and you put them into a circle. You take an iron ring, and you stick the staves in an iron ring into a circle, and then you build a fire. You take the staves, you put them over the fire. Now, oak is very malleable. That's why you get these nice round parts of the barrel. And the reason why this shape is like this, it was solely just for functionality, so they could roll it up and off of ships. So what happens is they hammer the barrels to make it into the shape they want, then you have a barrel. Notice I said you had to build a fire. When you're building a barrel, you have to char it, and that heat allows you to bend it how you want the shape to be. While you're doing this, you're charring the wood. This is important for wine. Oak has properties in it. When wine is put into contact with the oak, the wine can extract these certain properties, adding to the wine. A couple things going on here. Let's talk about Chardonnay. Have you ever had a Chardonnay that smelled toasty and like vanilla at the same time? Those two elements are a result of oak exposure. You see, oak has something called vanillin in it.
Vanillin is an organic compound. Its functional groups include aldehyde, ether, and phenol. It is the primary component of the extract of the vanilla bean. It is also found in oak.
Vanillin, vanilla. When you char a barrel, that vanillin is concentrated. Also, there are tannins in oak, just like there are tannins in grapes, just like the tannins in the wine. So you have this vessel, and it can hold wine. And while it's holding wine, it's adding to the wine. Also, when a barrel is made through these staves, there is no wine coming out of these little cracks. But there's a little bit of oxygen going in. You throw the wine in a barrel, this is beautiful, and it sits there, and it interacts with the vanillin. It interacts with the char, and it interacts with the small amounts of oxygen permeating very minutely into the barrel, slowly softening it. And that's why we age wine in barrels. We've all heard the term American oak. We've heard the term French oak. Some of us have heard the term Slovenian oak. You have oak forests all throughout the world. And different species of oak have different intensities of properties that we just talked about. Now we enter the winemaker into the equation. This winemaker has made a decision. They want to age their wine in oak barrels. Do they buy American oak? Do they buy Slovenian oak? Or do they buy French oak?
Vive la France.
When you're aging an American oak, the influence is going to be pretty intense, and that's how we've developed our culture and our appreciation for wine in the United States for American wines. So when you put a wine into a French barrel, all those elements, the char, the vanilla, and the tannin, because there's tannin in oak as well, it's more subtle. Slovenian oak is a little subtler than American oak and a little more powerful than French oak. Slovenian oak makes great wine. Barrel making and barrel aging and the decisions that winemakers have to make, it's very complicated. Actually, the whole idea of barrels and oak is about as complicated as wine itself. So I don't want to get too involved, but you have a couple things to think about here. You have those 3 oaks that we talked about generally. Now, what's about the size of the barrel? The smaller the barrel, the more interaction the wine has to the oak, concentrating a little bit more. The bigger the barrel, the less interaction, the smoother it's going to be. So as you can see, there's a lot going on here. But what it comes down to is what wine does with oak. Wine has a lot to give, has a lot of aromas, has a lot of flavors. And oak just smooths it out and gives it even more. It deepens the complexity, minutely oxidizes the wine, aging it, helping it along, softening it. The vanilla content adds this nice, supple kind of aromatic flavor. Other elements give you this little spice. It's a beautiful thing. Man, barrel aging, oak barrels, when it's done right, and the winemaker is worth their salt, they can make a beautiful wine. This is how oak and wine come together.
That's really good.